I'm standing in my attorney's office on Beacon Hill in Boston, looking at a spreadsheet I created in 2015. It shows $487 in my checking account. 7 years later, I'm looking at another spreadsheet. This one shows $2.1 million in company assets. The difference between those two numbers is everything I'm about to tell you. And it's also the reason my husband is sitting across from me in a conference room, about to find out that I kept better records than he kept secrets. Let me take you back to April 2015. I was 28 years old, working as a freelance social media consultant for small businesses in the greater Boston area. I was making maybe $3,200 a month if I was lucky, working from a desk in the bedroom of a one-bedroom apartment in Somerville that I shared with my boyfriend, Marcus. We'd been together for 3 years at that point. He was charming. That's the word everyone uses, and it's accurate. He could walk into a room and make you feel like you were the only person he'd ever wanted to talk to. But charm doesn't pay rent. Marcus worked as a junior graphic designer at a mid-size marketing firm. He made $52,000 a year. He was good at his job, talented, really, but he had no ambition. And I don't mean that judgmentally. I mean he would literally say things like, "Why would I want more responsibility? More money means more problems." He'd say this while eating the dinner I'd cooked after I'd finished my client calls. I noticed things, small things at first. He'd check his phone constantly but never responded to work emails for hours. He'd disappear into the bedroom to focus on a personal project but never showed me what he was working on. When I'd ask about his day, he'd give me vague answers. Tired, boring, meetings, nothing specific. I noticed, but I didn't connect the dots. What I did connect was an opportunity. In April 2015, a client of mine, a boutique fitness studio in Cambridge called Form and Function, asked me if I could help them revamp their entire digital presence. Their Instagram had 847 followers. Their website looked like it was built in 2008. They were losing potential clients to competitors with better branding. The owner, a woman named Diane who was in her mid-50s, offered me $5,000 to create a 3-month strategy and handle the implementation. I said yes immediately. That $5,000 felt like wealth. I remember depositing the check and not touching it for a week, just looking at my bank balance like it was a miracle. What I did with that money changed everything. I used $3,200 to buy a used MacBook Pro. I spent $1,200 on Hootsuite Pro, Adobe Creative Cloud, and some basic accounting software. I spent the remaining $600 on a domain name and basic website hosting. By May 2015, I had the infrastructure for a real business. The Form and Function transformation took me 8 weeks. I redesigned their Instagram strategy from scratch. I created content calendars for 3 months in advance. I built a new website using Wix that actually converted visitors into trial memberships. Within 90 days, their follower count went from 847 to 4,300. More importantly, their trial memberships increased by 34%. Diane was stunned. She asked me how much to hire me permanently as a contractor. I told her $6,000 a month. She said yes. By July 2015, I had Form and Functions retainer locked in. By September, I had 3 more clients. By December, I had 6 clients and I was making $18,400 a month. I was 29 years old and I was running a legitimate business. I remember the exact moment I told Marcus I was going to leave my apartment job and go full-time with this. We were sitting in that one bedroom in Somerville. He was on the couch with his laptop. I was at the desk. I turned around and told him I was resigning from my consulting gigs and launching an official agency. He said, "Cool, that's cool." That was the entire conversation. The next 6 years were relentless, not in a dramatic way, in a consistent, methodical, documented way. By 2016, I had hired my first employee, a designer named Kira who worked 20 hours a week at $22 an hour. By 2017, I'd incorporated the business as an LLC called Beacon Social, registered in Massachusetts. By 2018, I had 4 full-time employees and was managing $380,000 in annual revenue. By 2019, we'd hit $680,000. By 2021, we were at $1.2 million. I did this by waking up at 5:30 a.m. every morning, by working 6 days a week, sometimes 7, by learning skills I didn't have, basic accounting, contract law, tax code, payroll management, by being in client meetings during the day and doing administrative work until 11 p.m. at night. And Marcus stayed exactly the same. He'd wake up around 8 a.m. He'd make coffee. He'd sit on the couch and work on his personal projects, which, I would eventually learn, were gaming live streams on Twitch. He streamed under the name Marcus Plays to an audience of about 340 people. He made approximately $200 a month in sponsorships and donations. He'd been doing this for 2 years at that point, secretly, without telling me. When I wasn't working, he wanted to spend time together, and I wanted to spend time with him. So we'd go out to dinner, or we'd watch movies, or we'd just sit together. It wasn't bad. It was normal. It was the life I was living while building something. Here's what I noticed during those 6 years. He never once asked me about the business, not the strategy, not the challenges, not the growth. He'd ask me how my day was, and I'd tell him, and he'd nod and say something like, "That's good, you're killing it." But he never asked questions. He never wanted to understand what I was building. When I'd mention financial stress, which, as a growing business owner, you always have, he'd suggest I hire someone else to manage it. When I mentioned that I was thinking of moving to a bigger office, he said, "Do whatever you think is best." He was supportive in the way someone is supportive of a hobby they don't really care about. By 2021, I had incorporated Beacon's Social officially. We moved out of the apartment and bought a house in Brookline. It was a $720,000 mortgage, and I paid it myself. Marcus contributed nothing to the down payment. I made $94,000 in net profit that year. We got married in June 2022. Small ceremony, 65 people, backyard of the Brookline house. My parents were there. His parents were there. Everyone gave speeches about how perfect we were together, how complementary we were, how he was the calm to my storm. Nobody mentioned that the storm was paying for everything. In March 2023, Marcus asked me if he could take a month off work. We were in the kitchen. I was reviewing contracts for a new client engagement. He was making breakfast. "A month," I asked. "For what?" I don't know. I'm burned out. I want to just relax. Maybe go visit my brother in Portland for a while." I remember pausing. The business was at $1. $8 million in annual revenue at that point. I had 12 employees. We were managing 28 active clients. I was working 70 hours a week. I was not burned out. I was thriving. I was building something. "Sure," I said. "That sounds nice." That's where I made my mistake. I didn't ask questions. I didn't notice. He took the month. He went to Portland. He came back, and then he took another month off in June. That's when something shifted. He started talking about how much I worked, how stressed I seemed, how maybe we should think about balance, about what really mattered. "What matters," I said, "is that we have this house and this life because I built a business." I wasn't trying to be mean. I was stating a fact. He got quiet. He said, "I know, you remind me constantly." But I hadn't reminded him. That was the thing. I had never said, "Look at what I built." I had never thrown it in his face. He was hearing a reminder that didn't exist except in his own mind. In September 2023, he brought up something new. He said he'd been thinking about starting his own business, a consulting firm that helped creators monetize their online presence. He was very vague about the details. "That's great," I said. "What do you need?" "Just space, and maybe some startup capital, like $25,000. I gave him $25,000. I set it up as a loan with a 3% interest rate and a 5-year repayment schedule. I had a contract drawn up by my business attorney. I wanted to be supportive, but I also wanted to be professional. He never made a payment. The loan was never mentioned again. In January 2024, I noticed something odd in our joint bank account statement. A withdrawal of $8,700 to something called legal partners, that I didn't authorize. I asked Marcus about it. "Oh," he said casually, "I got a consultation with a divorce attorney. Just wanted to understand my options if things went south. Just in case." "Just in case," I repeated. "I don't want anything to happen," he said quickly. "I'm just being prepared." I felt something in my chest shift. It was cold, calculated. That was February 2024. By March 2024, I had done something I'm not particularly proud of, but something I don't regret. I pulled our complete financial history from our joint bank account for the past 7 years. I printed it all out, every transfer, every deposit, every withdrawal. What I found was methodical. Starting in August 2023, there were small transfers, $2,000 here, $3,500 there, always coded as personal use or household expenses. Over the course of 6 months, $47,300 moved out of our joint account into his personal account. I only noticed because I was looking. I also pulled his browser history from the Wi-Fi router logs. Yes, I had administrative access to my own Wi-Fi. This is not illegal. What I found was that he'd been researching Massachusetts marital asset division law since November 2023. He'd been consulting with attorneys since January, and he'd been communicating with his brother in Portland, who apparently worked in finance, about something coded in their emails as the exit strategy. This was calculated. This was planned. On March 15, 2024, Marcus told me he wanted a divorce. "I love you," he said. We were sitting in the living room of the Brookline house. "But I don't think we're compatible long-term. You're too focused on work. I'm focused on life. I think we should part ways amicably." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I called my attorney, Patricia Chen, and asked for an emergency consultation. Patricia was a pit bull in professional clothing. She was 54 years old, had been practicing divorce law for 22 years, and had a particular interest in cases involving business assets. "Walk me through everything," she said. I brought her every document, bank statements, business incorporation papers, tax returns, profit and loss statements, email chains, client contracts, everything. She took 2 hours reading through the files. When she was done, she looked at me and said, "He's going to claim marital property rights to the business. He's going to argue that it was built during your marriage, which is technically true, though he contributed nothing. He's going to ask for a percentage of the asset value or a percentage of ongoing revenue." "Can he do that?" I asked. "In Massachusetts, yes. Marital property is defined as property acquired during the marriage, regardless of whose name it's on. The fact that you built it yourself and funded it yourself might actually work against you, because it shows that marital assets were used to build it." I felt my stomach drop. "However," Patricia continued, "you have something he doesn't have. Documentation. You've kept meticulous records of everything. Every dollar you put into this business came from your personal work, every hire you made, every client you landed, every decision. If we can show that this business was built entirely from your intellectual property, your time, and your labor, and that he contributed literally nothing, not money, not work, not even emotional support, we can argue that it's a separate property asset, not marital property." "How do we prove that?" I asked. "We already have," she said. "Your records prove it. The business bank account shows no contributions from him. Your tax returns show your personal income was the only income. And the piece de resistance," she held up a copy of his Twitch account, "is that he was spending his time on this, not on the marriage or on supporting you while you built something." Marcus's attorney was a man named Richard Hoffman. He was aggressive and dismissive in every communication. His opening position was that Marcus deserved 40% of Beacon Social's asset value, which at that point was approximately $2.1 million. He was asking for $840,000. "On what grounds?" Patricia responded in a letter. "Marital property acquired during the marriage," Richard responded. "My client built this business from $500 in personal savings, with zero contribution from your client. Your client did not provide financial support, did not work for the company, did not provide childcare, they have no children, and did not provide spousal support while the business was being built. Marital property law does not entitle a spouse to the fruits of another spouse's labor when that labor was undertaken during the marriage, but with zero contribution from the other spouse. The legal back and forth took 4 months. What eventually happened was that Marcus's position weakened considerably when Patricia deposed him. Under oath, he admitted that he had never invested money in the business, had never worked for the business, and had not even asked about the business in any meaningful way. He admitted to the $47,300 in transfers and claimed it was for household and personal expenses. He admitted to researching divorce law while married and consulting with attorneys without discussing it with me. Most damaging to his case was Patricia's question about the $25,000 loan. "Did you ever intend to repay this loan?" she asked. He didn't answer. "Did you use this $25,000 for your consulting business?" "Partially," he said. "Can you show documentation of how the $25,000 was spent?" He couldn't. The money had essentially disappeared. By August 2024, Marcus's demand had dropped to $150,000. By October, he was asking for $80,000. By November, he agreed to a settlement, $50,000 in cash, which covered his half of our personal household items, furniture, art, jewelry, his car, and the house would be sold. The proceeds would be split 50-50. The business would remain entirely my asset. The house sold in January 2025 for $795,000. After the mortgage and real estate fees, we each walked away with approximately $37,000. So he received roughly $87,000 total in the divorce settlement. He'd been married to me while I built a $2.1 million business, and he received less than 0.1% of its value. I'm not going to tell you that this felt good. Justice isn't always satisfying in the way you think it will be. I was angry, I was hurt, I was also relieved, and I was vindicated. What struck me most was how close he came to getting away with it. If I hadn't been meticulous about documenting everything, if I hadn't kept separate records, if I hadn't noticed that one transaction and decided to investigate, he would have had a legitimate claim to a significant portion of my business. The court would have been sympathetic. He was the neglected spouse, the spouse whose needs weren't met, the spouse who sacrificed his career advancement, though he hadn't actually sacrificed anything, for the marriage. Instead, the documentation told a different story. The documentation showed that I had built something while he had taken from it. Marcus moved back to Portland in March 2025. I haven't heard from him since the divorce was finalized in February. His consulting business never materialized. His Twitch channel still exists, but he hasn't streamed since August 2024. I'm 37 years old now. I own Beacon Social outright. We're projecting $2.8 million in revenue for 2025. I have 16 employees. Last month, one of my junior designers, a 24-year-old woman named Carmen, told me she was thinking about quitting because her fiancé said she was too ambitious. She was considering giving up her career. I invited her to my office and showed her something, a folder. It contained every piece of documentation from my divorce, not to make her sad, not to make her bitter toward men, but to show her that documentation is power, that keeping records isn't paranoia, it's protection. You document everything, I told her. Every conversation, every email, every agreement, because someday you might need to prove what you built, and if you document it, nobody can take it from you. She didn't quit. She got engaged to someone else, a man who was genuinely excited about her career and supported her ambitions. I don't hate Marcus. Hate requires energy I don't have, but I understand now what I missed. He wasn't tired or burned out. He was resentful. Resentful that I was building something. Resentful that I didn't need him. Resentful that I documented my life so carefully that he couldn't rewrite the story later. The business is my home now. The 12-person team that's grown to 16. The clients who trust me with their brands. The empire I built from $500 and relentless work. And I have a rule now. I keep better records than anyone could ever hope to hide behind. That $487 I started with in 2015, I framed it, not as a monument to my success, but as a reminder that I built this. I documented it, and when someone tried to claim it was theirs, the documentation proved otherwise. That's the real lesson, not that men will betray you, not that marriage is a trap. The lesson is simpler: document your life, document your work, document your agreements.